All right. Waleed Phares is on the Super Celebrity Hotline, advisor to Anti-Terrorism Caucus of the House in the House of Representatives. Waleed, thanks so much for being with us. Is there anything specifically in this, what you've heard thus far, what you know thus far about this, that A, surprises you, or B, really alarms you in a way that it's changed the tactics that the Iranians are using?
Actually, it did not surprise me, but of course it alarms me, and this is why. It seems that the design of the operation, and then many in Washington and in Europe didn't really understand the early stage of it, is precisely that this is not signed. That's why the operation was sloppy. That's why the Iranian President decided to send the cash to a Mexican cartel, not even the entire cartel, but a group of them. Because what they wanted to do was to assassinate the Saudi ambassador and blow up the Saudi embassy, not as an end to the process, but as a triggering point. And that's what members of Congress and members of the administration are trying to hint at, as a triggering point to a series of other actions within Saudi Arabia. And then they added the Israeli component, meaning a strike against the Israeli embassy, so that in the video or in the statement to be issued after this would have happened, they would accuse the Saudis of betraying, they would accuse the Saudis of being connected to the Israelis, and that would have been the message for the insurgents in Eastern Arabia to begin their activities. That's why the Iranians wanted it to be a non-Iranian action that they would fund, and then they will come at the end and say, oh, there is a trouble in Saudi Arabia, it's because the Shia are suppressed, and on and on and on. But they were trapped simply because we intercepted the one weak link, which is that man that we have in custody today.
But, Doctor, if that multi-pronged, God forbid, that multi-pronged attack had been successful from the viewpoint of the Iranians, what would be the end game there? It would seem to be the first strike in the death of that nation eventually.
Of which nation?
Of Iran. I mean, because it would be obvious that they had, made the first strike, and there would be retaliatory
on American
blows,
soil.
But it would launch a war. It would trigger a war that they could not possibly think they could win.
All depended, but that's precisely the point. They wanted it to be non-signed, meaning the video or the press release that would have been aired as a result of that or after that wouldn't have been Iran saying it's us. It would have been a jihadi group. That's what they've done in many places, in Iraq and in Lebanon with the assassination. So what they wanted to do is to create a front. That front would do the operation, would call on Saudi insurgents, and they would be out of it. Otherwise, they would have used their own, resources. They wanted to have a black op operation and come only later to say, oh, there's trouble in Saudi Arabia and the Shia are suppressed. So they didn't have any alibi against them.
So, Dr. Phares, what you're saying is that the Iranians didn't think their fingerprints were going to be on this thing.
Correct.
Wow.
Correct. That's the reason for why they did a Mexican connection and not because they have their assets here in America. They have Hezbollah. They have their Iranian assets. They did it through a quote unquote a militia, a Mexican militia, just that they are out of it.
Wow, that's fascinating. So now that their fingerprints are on it, and now that it's worked its way back, and there's been a call at the highest levels now. They're being very cryptic about what this means, but the White House did say yesterday that the highest levels of the U.S. government have spoken to the highest levels of the Iranian government about this. First of all, who do you think that is, and what do you think was said?
Well, first of all, it would have taken back channels to do it. I don't have names, of course. I'm not privy of it, but I would assume that it would be the highest level of our intelligence talking to the highest level of the Pasdaran in Iran and sending the message all the way to Ayatollah Khamenei and telling them, if you are behind it, we need the guys who did it. We need the guys who ordered it because as United States, we want to go after them. But I don't think that the Iranians are in a position, basically, to respond positively. So there is a crisis out there now.
All right, so now what's the next step, do you think, in terms of this play here? What should we be doing to Iran?
There are lots of small steps, some of which are underway. For example, the internationalization is crucial. Take the file, go to the Security Council, even though the UN is not going to get anywhere, but fill that space, grab it, because you could put pressure on the Russians and the Chinese. This is an international terrorist act against a capital. So when it hits the national security of one member of the Security Council, the others sort of say, okay, now we understand. We can get more of the so-called higher sanctions. But that's not going to do it. What's going to do it is an American oil Arab alliance to cripple Iran's regime is what should come next. And that would be the Saudis and their friends in the Gulf telling all those partners of Iran, Japan, India, the third party, if you're going to do business with Iran, you're not doing business with us. That's different than the United States because we've used every resource that we can. We need the Arab Saudis, and now they have a reason to do it. And last, we really need to partner with the Iranian Green Movement. That would be the maker and the breaker of the next stage in the confrontation with that regime.
These are the people that 2 years ago almost won an election in a rigged. They almost won a rigged election against them, and that's a pretty interesting thing. Okay, this does tell us something, though, Dr. Phares. I think that in America that we don't really think about very much, and I think a lot of Americans don't believe that the Muslim world has very many fissures moving through it. And you've got the Saudis, the Iranians. You've got this national overlay over what was within the last 200 years tribal warriors. There are tribal wars between these groups. Now has this national overlay. There's a lot of dysfunction here, and there's a lot of violence internally.
Absolutely. I published my latest book, The Coming Revolution: Struggle for Freedom in the Middle East, last year, projecting that revolts are going to happen, projecting the Arab Spring. And, I must claim it's the only book that has done so. And in it, I argue that within those civil societies, there are a lot of forces, fighting each other. It's like a triangle. On the top, you have authoritarian regimes. Those are shaking. Some of them went down. Libya, Tunisia, Egypt, Yemen is on its way. In Syria, it's very much challenged. And then the bottom line you have, the bottom part of it, you have, on the one hand, civil society, people whom we saw in Egypt, for example, rising, the youth, the women, students,
educated people, right?
Right, a laptop, Facebook. And on the other side, you have the Islamists. So now what's happening in the Arab world is a race between the Islamists, on the one hand, very much organized, funded, and civil society forces. This is the future of the next wave of confrontation within the Middle East.
All right. So Dr. Walid Phares, advisor to the Anti-Terrorism Caucus of the U.S. House of Representatives, and the author of The Coming Revolution: Struggle for Freedom in the Middle East. Thank you very much, Doctor. Appreciate your time, sir.
Thank you for having me. You bet.
Thank you, sir. Enlightening stuff from the good doctor.
Oh, he's a brilliant guy.